Have you ever felt that relentless drumbeat of anxiety? That constant feeling of being on edge, maybe a racing heart, or just a mind spinning with all the what ifs?
Yeah, it's incredibly common.
Right. And if you felt that, you are definitely not alone. Millions of people experience this. A lot of times pretty silently, letting it sort of dictate their choices, their relationships, even how they feel about themselves. So today we're doing a deep dive into something that sounds really, really promising. It's called the Anxiety Reset, Rewire Your Brain in 30 Days. It's a guide by Neal Rowse, published just this year, 2025.
And what's really interesting about this deep dive, our mission, is essentially to give you a shortcut, not necessarily to every single page, but to the core, the really transformative ideas in the book.
Okay.
It's about understanding this science-backed roadmap, showing how your brain can genuinely learn to respond differently to stress. I mean, literally shifting from that state of fear towards, well, calm.
And the core promise sounds incredibly empowering.
It really is. It's that your brain isn't, fixed. It's profoundly adaptable. It's actually capable of rewiring itself.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more. So the central idea here, it sounds like, is neuroplasticity.
Exactly. That amazing ability of your brain to form new connections, new neural pathways.
And the book really leans into this idea that consistent practice, maybe even just over a month, can spark this big change.
And it's not just theory, right? We're talking solid science.
Well,
there was a 2022 meta-analysis looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Great, CBT.
And it showed that these structured 30-day interventions can cut anxiety symptoms by a pretty remarkable 40 to 50%.
Wow, that's huge, 40 to 50%.
Yeah, it's a significant shift. And that's where the relevance for you, the listener, really comes in. Whether you're dealing with social anxiety or maybe intense work stress or you're grappling with health fears, this deep dive is sort of designed as a personalized journey for you.
So it's not about quick fixes.
Definitely not. It's about understanding a process for real, lasting change. We'll start by sort of decoding the anxious brain, getting a handle on its internal alarm system.
Okay.
Then we'll distill the most impactful, practical strategies from that 30-day reset in the book.
Gotcha.
And finally, we'll explore how you can build long-term resilience, way beyond that first month.
All right, let's jump into part one then. The Anxious Brain Unveiled, Decoding Your Internal Alarm System. So maybe imagine your brain has its own, super vigilant, incredibly fast security guard.
That's a perfect way to put it. We're talking about the amygdala. It's this almond-shaped structure deep inside your brain.
The amygdala.
Yeah, and that's your threat detection hub. It processes sensory information like lightning fast, often way before you're even consciously aware of what's happening. And it triggers that classic fight or flight response. The feeling heart pounds, muscles get tense, breathing quickens.
And here's the tricky part, right? The part that often causes problems. This ancient security guard doesn't really know the difference between, say, a genuine threat like a saber-toothed tiger
Right.
and a modern stressor like a critical email from your boss.
Exactly. The book uses this really relatable example of Sarah. She's a 32-year-old marketing manager. Her amygdala reacts to an email like it's a predator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it floods her body with adrenaline and cortisol. And over time, that kind of hyperreactivity, it just gets deeply wired in.
Okay, so the amygdala is the vigilant security guard. What about the rational part?
Good question. That's where the prefrontal cortex comes in. It's right behind your forehead, and it's like the brain's calm, rational executive director.
The manager.
Kind of, yeah. It's responsible for reasoning, planning, and importantly, modulating emotional responses.
What?
So ideally, when the amygdala rings the alarm, the prefrontal cortex should step in, assess the actual threat level, and sort of dial down the response if it's, not really dangerous. But chronic stress messes that up. It really does.
Yeah.
What's concerning is how chronic stress can actually weaken the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate the amygdala. It leaves that alarm system kind of stuck in overdrive.
So that's why Sarah, in the example, her prefrontal cortex struggles.
Yeah.
And she ends up spiraling into worst-case scenarios over just an email.
Precisely. It can't put the brakes on effectively.
So what's fueling this whole internal alarm system then?
Yeah.
You mentioned hormones.
Right, stress hormones. Two key players. Adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline is the fast one. Gives you that immediate jolt, the racing heart, sweaty palms, that kind of thing.
The immediate kick.
Yeah. Cortisol, on the other hand, is slower to act, but it hangs around longer. It sustains energy during what the body perceives as prolonged stress.
And in short bursts, that's good, right?
Yeah.
Helps us escape danger.
Absolutely. Lifesavers in genuine emergencies. But when anxiety becomes chronic, cortisol levels tend to stay elevated, and that's where the problem really ramps up.
How so?
Well, it creates this truly vicious cycle. High cortisol actually makes the amygdala more sensitive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it amplifies anxiety, which then triggers more cortisol, which makes the amygdala even more sensitive. It just keeps going.
That explains Sarah's exhaustion and irritability. Her system's just constantly firing.
Exactly. Her HPA axis, that's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the body's central stress response system, it's stuck in overdrive, even when the immediate threat, like the email, has passed.
So how does anxiety turn into this really stubborn, ingrained habit? You mentioned neuroplasticity earlier.
Right, and neuroplasticity is fascinating because it's both the problem and the solution here.
How does that work?
Well, the book explains it really nicely. Every time you react to a tummy with worry or fear, you're basically reinforcing that neural pathway in your brain. You're paving what the book calls a well-trodden highway.
Like making a groove deeper.
Exactly. It's that classic idea, neurons that fire together, wire together. It just makes it easier for your brain to take that anxious route next time. It becomes the default.
But the flip side is powerful.
Hugely powerful. Just as your brain can learn to be anxious, it can absolutely learn to be calm. Consistent practice, like the book details, can gradually weaken those anxious pathways and literally build new, healthier ones.
Okay, so how do you start making that practical for someone listening?
Well, a crucial first step the book emphasizes is identifying your own unique anxiety patterns. It guides you to really focus on 3 key areas.
Which are?
Your specific triggers, what sets it off. Then, how it shows up physically, the physical symptoms. And third, your characteristic cognitive patterns, the thoughts that usually come with it.
It makes sense. Laying the groundwork by understanding your own specific blueprint almost.
Exactly. Because think about it. If you recall a recent anxious moment, what actually triggered it? Was it speaking in public? Or maybe just a thought like, I'm going to fail. How did it feel in your body, that pit in your stomach, tight chest?
Yeah.
And what were the thoughts running through your head? Catastrophizing, those endless what-if loops.
Like Sarah's pattern. Boss's email triggers a knot in her stomach and the thought, I'm going to get in trouble.
Right. Identifying your specific pattern is really the first step toward reclaiming some control.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, it does feel like the modern world, especially now in 2025, kind of creates a perfect storm for anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. The relentless pace of change, constant technology, social pressures, it all keeps that amygdala on high alert.
And our lifestyles don't always help either.
Not at all. The book mentions how poor sleep can dramatically increase amygdala activity by up to 60%.
60%? Wow.
Yeah. And a lack of physical activity reduces those calming neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, leaving us just less equipped to cope.
Okay, let's move into part 2 then. The 30-day roadmap, building the foundation. The book seems to stress that this initial phase isn't about huge dramatic changes right away.
Exactly. It's more about cultivating a really crucial sense of awareness and laying the neural groundwork for change.
So less about fixing, more about understanding first.
Precisely. The first key insight from the anxiety reset is that real meaningful change starts not with immediate action, but with acute awareness.
Okay.
So the book guides you through this foundational first week, inviting you to sort of map out your anxiety's unique fingerprint, like an internal diagnostic.
And what's so transformative about that? Just naming it.
Well, it's not just naming the triggers, although that's important. It's understanding how simply observing your reactions, like with a pause and notice practice the book suggests, can immediately start to disarm them.
Okay, so let's use Alex, the graphic designer example. He gets anxious about client emails, heart races, thoughts of I'm not good enough.
Right. So the book suggests when he opens that email, he just pauses, takes a breath, notices the physical sensations, the thoughts, without judging them.
That sounds simple, but probably not easy.
It takes practice, but it's not passive observation. It's actually an active engagement of the prefrontal cortex. It creates this vital little gap between the stimulus, the email, and his usual anxious response.
And there's science behind that pause.
Yeah, a 2017 study showed that mindfulness training directly reduces amygdala reactivity. So that simple pause is actually a powerful way to disrupt the anxiety cycle right at the start.
Okay, so you build awareness, and then what?
And then, building on that awareness, the guide introduces some simple, but honestly incredibly powerful tools to immediately calm your physical system down.
Like what?
One standout technique is called box breathing. It's apparently used even by Navy SEALs.
Box breathing, how does that work?
Super simple. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold again for 4 seconds, making a box shape with your breath.
Okay, 4, 4, 4, 4. And what's happening physiologically?
Something profound, actually. You're activating your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, mainly via the vagus nerve. It's like hitting your nervous system's reset button.
So shifting out of fight or flight.
Exactly, into that calmer state. It immediately quiets that internal alarm. And a 2018 study confirmed it lowers heart rate and cortisol levels. It's a quick win.
So as you move through this first week, the book really emphasizes mastering that mind-body connection.
Absolutely. We talked about how anxiety is this constant feedback loop, right, between what you're thinking and how your body's reacting.
And the vagus nerve is key to that.
Central to it. Think of the vagus nerve as this super highway connecting your brain to your heart, lungs, gut. All crucial areas involved in the stress response.
Wow.
And research shows that just by activating it, you might reduce anxiety symptoms by up to 30%.
30% just from activating a nerve. That's significant.
It really is. And the book suggests some surprisingly simple ways to do it.
Like what? Any easy ones?
Humming.
Humming, seriously.
Seriously, think of Maya, the teacher example. After a stressful grading session, she might just hum quietly to herself. It helps soothe her tight chest and racing mind.
How does humming work?
Well, the vibrations created by humming actually stimulate the vagus nerve directly. This increases something called heart rate variability, which is a key marker of your parasympathetic system being active, your calming system. A 2020 study backed this up.
Huh. Simple, accessible. I like it.
Yeah, it's a quick way to just shift your internal state.
Okay, so humming for the vagus nerve. What else in that first week?
As you get further in, the focus shifts to grounding your body in the present moment, especially when your mind starts spiraling.
Getting out of your head.
Exactly. The 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique is a fantastic tool for this. It interrupts those anxiety spirals by pulling your focus back to your immediate sensory input.
How does that one work? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You just intentionally notice 5 things you can see right now, 4 things you can physically feel or touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
Okay, so engaging all the senses.
Right. Maya, the teacher, might use this during a tense parent-teacher conference. Notice the chair she's sitting on, hear the clock ticking, smell the coffee, taste the water she just sipped.
And that pulls her out of the anxious thoughts.
It does, because it actively engages your sensory cortex and your prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
It redirects your attention away from those swirling worries onto concrete, present reality. A 2019 study confirmed this mechanism.
Makes sense. Anchoring yourself.
Precisely. And to really wrap up and solidify this foundational week, the guide introduces something called reframing journaling.
Okay, journaling?
Yeah.
But specific.
Yeah, it's not just, writing down how you feel. It's a structured practice. You externalize your anxious thoughts, you actively challenge their validity, and then you consciously work to create a more balanced, realistic narrative.
So like Maya grappling with perfectionism. Instead of just writing, I feel like a failure.
Right. She might write down the thought, I'm failing my students. Then challenge it with evidence of what she's doing well and reframe it to something like, I'm doing my best with the resources I have, and that's okay.
And this helps rewire things.
Absolutely. It actively engages the prefrontal cortex to process emotions. That's a core principle of CBT. And it helps build new, healthier neural pathways. A 2021 study showed this kind of practice could lead to about a 25% reduction in anxiety. It's about consciously shaping that inner dialogue.
Okay, so we've built the foundation. Now we're moving into part 3. Rewiring and taming. This sounds like where the deeper work happens.
Exactly. This is where you really start leveraging neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, to actively replace those overgrown highways of anxiety with new, calmer pathways.
And the book suggests this phase can really make a dent.
Yeah, it underscores that these kinds of repetitive, intentional interventions practiced consistently can reduce anxiety by around 35%. It's about that consistent action leading to actual structural changes in the brain.
Okay, so the first focus in this section is rewiring emotional responses.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
One technique the book introduces is positive action pairing.
Positive action pairing. Explain that.
It's basically about connecting a specific trigger, something that usually sets off your anxiety, with a calming or empowering action that you choose to do immediately after.
Creating a new association.
Precisely. Think of Jordan, the software developer example. A meeting invite pops up, which usually triggers his anxiety.
Okay.
Instead of letting the anxiety spiral, he immediately pairs that trigger with, say, doing slow box breathing and repeating an affirmation like, I'm prepared and confident.
So you're hijacking the old response.
You're intentionally forging a new positive association. And the repetition is key. It strengthens those new neural connections. There was a 2018 study on habit formation that supports this principle.
Okay, interesting. What comes after pairing?
Building on that, the book dives into core cognitive behavioral strategies, specifically something called thought restructuring.
Thought restructuring sounds like CBT stuff.
It is. It's where you learn to identify and actively challenge those cognitive distortions, those unhelpful, often automatic thinking patterns, like mind reading or catastrophizing.
Right, assuming the worst.
Exactly. So Jordan might catch himself thinking, they'll think I'm incompetent in that meeting. With thought restructuring, he'd consciously pause, gather evidence for and against that thought, like times he was seen as competent, and then reframe it into something more balanced and realistic. Maybe I have valuable insights to share, even if I'm nervous.
So you become like a detective for your own thoughts.
You really do. And this practice directly replaces those distorted thoughts with more evidence-based ones. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex's ability to intervene. And according to a big 2022 meta-analysis, this kind of work can lead to a really significant 40-60% reduction in anxiety.
40 to 60%, that's huge.
It really is. It's about changing the thinking habits.
And to really make those new pathways stick.
Right. To cement them, the book guides you towards intentional action planning.
Okay, what's that? Sounds proactive.
It is. It's about deliberately and strategically confronting your triggers, but in a controlled, manageable way. Instead of just avoiding situations that make you anxious.
Which is tempting.
Oh, totally. But instead, you plan a small, achievable step towards facing it.
So, Jordan, instead of dreading the meeting,
he might plan to share just one specific idea during the meeting. He'd use his other tools, like the breathing and thought restructuring, to prepare himself beforehand.
So it's like controlled exposure.
Exactly. It creates positive experiences that directly contradict those anxious expectations. This actively reduces the amygdala's activity over time. A 2021 study on exposure therapy showed about a 50% symptom decrease with this kind of approach. It proves the power of carefully planned, gradual engagement.
Okay, so rewiring emotional responses. Then the book focuses specifically on taming the amygdala.
Yes, it dedicates specific attention to calming down that security guard we talked about earlier.
Because it overreacts.
Yeah. Right. It tends to misfire in response to everyday situations, interpreting non-threats as actual danger. But the good news is the targeted interventions outlined in the book can actually decrease its activity by a pretty substantial 30 to 40%.
30 to 40% reduction in amygdala activity? How?
A key technique is gradual exposure practice. We touched on it with Jordan, but it's a core principle.
So facing your fears, but slowly.
Slowly and systematically. You build what's called an exposure hierarchy, a list of challenging situations related to your fear, ranked from least scary to most intimidating.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's take Priya, the nurse example, who gets anxious about medical emergencies.
Right.
Her hierarchy might start really small, like just thinking about a past challenging situation for a few minutes, then maybe reviewing hypothetical scenarios on paper, then perhaps role-playing a response in a low-stakes training environment.
So you build tolerance gradually.
Exactly. This process habituates the brain to the triggers. It weakens those old fear-based pathways. It's a powerful concept, again supported by that 2021 study showing exposure therapy's effectiveness.
What else helps tame the amygdala?
To complement exposure, the book introduces safe place visualization.
Visualization, like imagining calm things.
Sort of, but more actively. It's a powerful tool to soothe the amygdala by intentionally creating and mentally stepping into a vivid, positive, safe mental landscape.
How would Priya use that?
Well, maybe while she's doing her gradual exposure or just when feeling anxious, she might vividly picture herself in a calm, serene lake setting she loves. Maybe she simultaneously imagines herself handling an emergency calmly and successfully while feeling the calm of the lake.
So it's not just escapism.
No, it's actively creating positive emotional memories that counteract the threat response. A 2019 study showed about a 25% anxiety reduction with consistent visualization practice. You're teaching the amygdala a different association.
Okay, and building on grounding techniques from earlier.
Yes, the book introduces advanced sensory grounding here. It's about really reinforcing that present moment calm by intensely focusing on a specific sensory input, especially when anxiety starts to spike or after doing some exposure work.
How's it different from the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
It might be more focused. For example, Priya, after visualizing handling an emergency, might physically hold a smooth stone or a stress ball. She'd focus intently on its texture, its temperature, its weight in her hand, maybe while repeating an affirmation like, I am capable or I am calm.
So using a physical anchor.
Exactly. It powerfully interrupts the amygdala's fear signal by pulling your focus away from internal worry and onto immediate external physical reality. A 2020 study linked this kind of grounding to about a 30% anxiety reduction.
So we've worked on emotional responses, tamed the amygdala. What's next in this phase?
Finally, this phase guides you toward calming the cortex, specifically dealing with how worry and rumination, just going over and over things in your head, can overload your prefrontal cortex.
Right, the CEO of the brain, he gets overwhelmed.
Exactly. And when it's overloaded, its ability to regulate emotions and make clear decisions weakens.
So how do you calm the cortex?
A key tool is focused mindfulness meditation.
Meditation again, but focused.
Yeah. This isn't necessarily about emptying your mind completely, which can feel impossible. It's more about training the prefrontal cortex to stay present and gently guide your attention back when it wanders, usually by focusing on something specific, like your breath.
Okay. How might Liam, the freelance writer example, use this?
He might practice for, say, 10 minutes before starting his workday. When those intrusive thoughts like, I'll miss the deadline, pop up, he just notices them without judgment and gently brings his focus back to his breath.
And that strengthens the prefrontal cortex.
It does. It improves its ability to regulate attention and emotions. It also actively reduces activity in the default mode network, that's the brain network, often responsible for mind wandering, rumination, and getting stuck in those what-if loops. A 2017 study showed this can lead to about a 35% anxiety reduction.
Interesting. Default mode network. Okay. What else for calming the cortex?
Another crucial strategy here is catastrophe reframing. We touched on reframing earlier, but this specifically targets those worst-case scenario thoughts.
The everything is going to fall apart thinking.
Exactly. Liam, for instance, might catch himself thinking, if I miss this deadline, my client will definitely fire me and my whole career will be over.
Which feels very real when you're anxious.
Totally. The practice involves rigorously, almost like a scientist, assessing the actual likelihood of that catastrophic outcome. What's the real evidence? And then actively exploring alternative, more realistic possibilities.
So challenging the catastrophe directly.
Right. It helps you evaluate situations more rationally, reducing that amygdala-driven fear response. Again, that 2022 meta-analysis linked these cognitive techniques to a 40–50% anxiety reduction. It's shifting from emotional reactivity back to logical assessment.
And as you near the end of this really intensive phase, there's one more technique.
Yeah, a surprisingly simple but really powerful concept, monotasking.
Monotasking, as opposed to multitasking.
Exactly. It means consciously focusing on doing just one thing at a time. It's designed to drastically reduce mental overload.
Which we all suffer from.
Oh, yeah. So for Liam, the writer, this might mean dedicating a block of time to just drafting one section of an article. No checking email, no social media notifications, no phone nearby. Just writing.
What's the benefit, besides maybe getting more done?
The benefit is getting more done, but also significantly reduced stress. A 2020 study showed that monotasking can cut stress levels by about 25% compared to multitasking. It improves focus and reduces that feeling of cognitive overload.
It's like giving your brain a much-needed break from constantly switching gears.
Precisely. Simple, but very effective for calming that overworked cortex.
Okay, so we've navigated the core rewiring phase. Now we arrive at part 4, resilience and locking in. This covers the final stretch, days 23 through 30, but also looks beyond.
Right, this sounds like where you solidify the changes and make sure they actually stick for the long haul. Exactly. It's about fortifying that new mental structure you've been building and ensuring these changes become truly sustainable.
So the first part of this final phase is about strengthening overall resilience. What does the book say about that?
Well, it defines resilience basically as your brain's adaptive capacity, its ability to bounce back, to recover from stress. It's not about never feeling stressed, but about how you respond and recover.
Okay, and how do you build that?
The book really emphasizes that things like positive emotions, consistent physical activity, and quality sleep aren't just, nice to haves. They are essential drivers of neuroplasticity. They actively boost those feel-good neurotransmitters that help buffer against stress.
So it's about building a whole supportive system for your brain.
Exactly, not just fixing individual parts.
What's a specific tool for boosting positive emotions?
A really powerful one the book suggests is gratitude flow practice.
Gratitude. We hear about that a lot. How does it work here?
It's about actively shifting your brain's focus. Our brains naturally have a negativity bias. They look for threats. Gratitude practice intentionally directs your attention towards positivity, towards abundance, towards what's going well.
How would Emma, the small business owner example, use this?
She might take just a few moments each day, maybe at the end of the day, to genuinely focus on specific things she's grateful for. Not just generic stuff, but like a specific customer's kind review, or a productive meeting she had, or even just the sun shining.
And this actually changes brain function.
It does. It activates the prefrontal cortex. It boosts dopamine and serotonin, those mood-regulating neurotransmitters. And a 2021 study demonstrated that regular gratitude practice can reduce anxiety symptoms by about 30%. It's literally training your brain to seek out and register the positive.
Okay, gratitude. What about physical activity?
Complementing the mental work is mindful movement practice.
Mindful movement, so not just hitting the gym hard.
Not necessarily. It's more about incorporating intentional movement into your routine in a way that supports mental clarity and resilience. It could be intense exercise if you enjoy that, but it doesn't have to be.
So for Emma, the business owner,
she might take a brisk walk in her local park. But instead of just zoning out, she might use the time mindfully, perhaps reflecting calmly on her business finances without judgment, or simply paying full attention to the sights, sounds, and smells around her, enjoying the sensory experience.
What are the benefits of that mindful aspect?
Well, the movement itself reduces cortisol and boosts endorphins. The mindfulness helps keep her present. It's a powerful combination that enhances neuroplasticity. A 2019 study showed that even just 20 to 30 minutes of moderate exercise can slash anxiety levels by up to 40%.
40% from a walk. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's a potent tool.
Okay, so gratitude, mindful movement. What about sleep? You mentioned its importance earlier.
Absolutely critical. So for day 27, the focus shifts squarely onto sleep optimization. We discussed how poor sleep can crank up amygdala activity by like 60%, making us way more vulnerable to stress.
Right. Makes everything feel harder.
Totally. So the book emphasizes creating a deliberate wind-down routine. Not just hoping sleep happens, but actively preparing for it.
What might that look like for Emma?
She might decide to dedicate, say, 30 to 60 minutes before her target bedtime purely for winding down. This could include some gentle stretching, maybe listening to calming music, doing a short meditation, and crucially, absolutely no screens during that time.
The no screens rule. Hard but important.
Very. Because that blue light messes with melatonin production. This kind of consistent routine helps restore the brain's natural balance. It can reduce anxiety symptoms by about 35% by directly calming down that amygdala reactivity and boosting prefrontal cortex function overnight. A 2020 study confirmed this.
So sleep isn't just passive rest, it's active brain repair time.
Exactly right. Crucial for consolidating the day's learning and managing emotional regulation.
Okay, now for the final push. Days 28 through 30. This is about really locking in the new mindset.
Yes. The science of locking in change is pretty clear. Those new neural pathways you've been building, they need consistent use to become the new default. Otherwise, the brain can easily slip back into the old, familiar, anxious routes.
Use it or lose it, essentially.
Kind of. Repetition, integration of the skills, and a clear intention to keep practicing are absolutely key here. And remember, the stats 30 days of consistent practice can lead to that 40-50% reduction in anxiety, and research suggests it can cut relapse rates by about half in the long run.
Okay, so day 28 is about integration.
Right. Consolidating what you've learned with an integrated practice routine. This isn't about learning new things, but combining your favorite, most effective practices into a regular routine.
Like Aisha, the marketing consultant example.
Exactly. She might create a short daily routine that includes, say, 5 minutes of box breathing to start her day calm, using thought restructuring whenever she notices presentation fears popping up, and maybe ending her day with a quick gratitude flow.
So weaving the tools together.
Yes. It's not just doing separate techniques in isolation. It's reinforcing those new neural connections across multiple brain regions simultaneously. A 2020 study showed that these kinds of integrated interventions could lead to about a 45% anxiety reduction. It makes the whole system more robust.
Okay, makes sense. What about day 29?
Day 29 is focused on crafting your personalized anxiety management toolkit.
Like a mental first aid kit.
Precisely. It's about identifying and writing down maybe your top 3 to 5 most effective core tools, the ones that work best for you, specifically tailored to your common triggers and patterns.
So Aisha's toolkit for presentation nerves.
Might explicitly list 1. Box breathing for immediate calm. 2. Thought restructuring, challenge negative predictions. 3. Quick gratitude burst, shift focus before start.
Is personalizing it so important?
Because it streamlines the whole neural rewiring process. It makes your most effective interventions readily accessible right when you need them. It boosts self-efficacy, that belief in your ability to cope. And a 2021 study linked these personalized toolkits to about a 40% anxiety reduction. It's about knowing exactly what works for you and having it ready.
Okay, your go-to strategies. And the final day, day 30.
Day 30 is all about resilience planning for long-term growth. This is about consciously building a strategy to maintain your progress beyond this initial 30-day reset.
So looking ahead.
Yeah. Aisha, for example, might sit down and set some realistic, achievable goals for the next few months. Things like meditate for 10 minutes daily, take a mindful walk 3 times a week, proactively use my toolkit whenever I anticipate a known stressor, like a big client meeting.
And having a plan helps it stick.
Absolutely. Structured plans like this help reinforce those new neural pathways. And we know from research on long-term CBT and mindfulness plans that they can reduce anxiety relapse rates by as much as 50%, according to a 2022 study. It's about making peace with the fact that this is an ongoing practice, not a one-time fix or a cure.
And the book emphasizes the journey continues well beyond 30 days, right?
Definitely. Chapter 9, which looks beyond the reset, suggests things like deepening your mindfulness practice, maybe with something like a body scan meditation.
How does that help?
It enhances what's called interoceptive awareness, your ability to notice subtle sensations within your body. So someone like Ravi, the project manager example, might use body scans regularly to catch early signs of tension or anxiety before they escalate, allowing him to intervene sooner with his tools.
Proactive management.
Exactly. It also really highlights the critical importance of building and nurturing a robust social support system.
Connection matters.
Hugely. Ravi might make a conscious effort to connect regularly with his partner, a trusted friend, maybe even join a local mindfulness group. Reducing isolation is key, as isolation often fuels anxiety.
Makes sense.
And, finally, it stresses the need to constantly adapt your strategies. Life changes, new stressors pop up. Your toolkit needs to evolve too. Ravi would need to adapt his strategies when facing, say, a new type of project deadline or a different kind of team dynamic. It's a continuous evolving process of self-care and adjustment.
Wow. Okay, so if you followed along with these ideas, you've really been on an incredible journey conceptually. It's worth taking a moment to just acknowledge that, to celebrate this potential transformation, this incredible feat of understanding how you can rewire your own brain.
Yeah, it's like you've been transforming your internal landscape, building this beautifully constructed house within yourself that feels calmer, stronger, and definitely more resilient.
We've explored how all these tools we discussed, from the simple box breathing and grounding to gratitude to the more involved exposure work and sleep optimization, how they all systematically strengthen those crucial neural pathways.
Right, those connections between your prefrontal cortex, the manager, your amygdala, the alarm, and your hippocampus, which is involved in memory and context.
And remember the science we kept mentioning, the potential for a 40–50% reduction in anxiety symptoms.
And importantly, a 50% lower relapse rate with sustained, consistent practice. That's truly profound.
What feels really empowering here is the idea that, anxiety might still pop up sometimes because, life happens, right?
Exactly. It's not about eliminating anxiety forever.
But you're no longer completely at its mercy. You now have this concept of a comprehensive mental first aid kit ready to go.
And a clear science-backed forward for managing it when it does arise.
So to sustain this kind of incredible change, what are the key takeaways?
Well, first, commit to consistency. Even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes of practice each day, little and often makes a huge difference in strengthening those pathways.
Okay, consistency.
Second, stay connected. Nurture your support network, friends, family, groups. Community really is resilience. Don't underestimate the power of connection.
Right. Don't go it alone?
Definitely not. Third, proactively adapt your strategies. As life throws new challenges your way, review and update your toolkit. What's working now? What needs adjusting?
Stay flexible.
Yeah. And finally, please, celebrate the small wins along the way. Every time you use a tool successfully, every time you navigate a situation a little differently, acknowledge it, because each one is real, tangible proof of your brain's incredible ability to transform.
That's a great point. Acknowledge the progress.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe we can leave you with a thought to reflect on.
Yeah, picture this. Imagine a future where anxiety is more like a signal, maybe a messenger, rather than a life sentence. Picture yourself navigating challenges with more clarity, responding to stress with a bit more calm, and actually savoring life's joys more fully, less overshadowed by worry.
That future it's not just some hopeful dream, right?
Not at all. It's absolutely within reach because by understanding these principles, you've already laid the essential groundwork for a life with significantly more freedom, more joy, and a much more pervasive, grounded sense of calm.